They called her a witch and threw her out of the village with nothing, no family, no food, no place to go. He was a billionaire until the day he was kidnapped and left to die. What happens when the girl the world abandoned becomes the only one who can save him? Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's dive into today's story. Her name was Ella Morgan. She was just 21 years old when her whole life changed. It started with a fever. Her mother fell sick one rainy evening. By the next morning, she was gone. 5 days later, her father, a quiet, hard-working man, died in his sleep. People whispered, 2 deaths in 1 week? Then one more blow. Her little brother, Toby, just 13 years old, slipped and hit his head near the stream. He didn't wake up. 3 deaths in 7 days. The whole village began to point fingers. She's cursed, someone said. She brought death into her family, another added. She's a witch, the herbalist shouted, and if we leave her here, more will die. No one asked Ella how she felt. No one hugged her or offered food. No one believed she was just a grieving girl who lost everything. They didn't care. On the 8th morning, before the sun rose, the elders came. They didn't knock. They kicked the door open. They pulled Ella out of the house, barefoot and crying. Her hair was scattered, her clothes soaked in tears. She begged them to stop. I'm not a witch, she cried. I loved them. I lost them too. But no one listened. Old women spat at her feet. Children picked up stones. One of the men, someone who used to carry her when she was little, pushed her hard and shouted, Leave! Never come back. And just like that, she was banished. Ella walked for hours that day. Through the farms, past the forest, into places she'd never been before. Her feet bled, her stomach growled. She had no bag, no money, no plan. Night came. It was cold and quiet. She found an old shed near a broken farm and slept there. Rats ran across the floor. Mosquitoes bit her skin. She cried until she had no more tears. That was her new home now. In the days that followed, Ella lived like a shadow. She waited till farmers left their land, then picked leftover cassava or corn. She used dry leaves and torn cloth to cover herself. When it rained, she hid under old trees. Nobody called her name anymore. She was the girl who once had a family. Now she was just the witch who was chased away. Still, she didn't die. Something inside her refused to give up. Every morning she woke up and told herself, one more day. Just one more day. She talked to herself to stay sane. She made fire with stones. She learned which leaves could be eaten. She built a tiny hut from wood and palm fronds. It wasn't much, but it was hers. No mirror, no friends, no laughter, just silence and survival. One evening, while lying under the stars, Ella whispered into the air, If anyone is out there, if there's still hope for me, show me. She didn't expect an answer, but something was already moving in the city, far away from her little bush world. A billionaire named Daniel Carter was about to walk into danger, and their two very different lives were about to collide. Ella woke up before the sun came out. Her body was cold. Her back ached from sleeping on hard ground again. The small hut she built from wood and old sacks barely kept the wind out. But it was all she had. There was no food. Again, she held her stomach and sat quietly for a moment. Her body felt weak, but her spirit refused to break. She stood up slowly, pushed the broken curtain aside, and stepped out into the early morning mist. Her hut sat at the edge of a bush path, far from the village, far from people. No one came this way unless they were lost or hunting. And that was good. She didn't want to see anyone. The last time she walked into the nearby market to beg for food, a woman saw her and screamed, Witch, don't let her touch you. Ella had run until her legs gave out. Now she kept to herself. She tied a piece of cloth over her head, grabbed her small hunting stick, and headed into the bush. That was how she survived now, hunting small animals, picking wild fruits, and searching for anything edible. She wasn't trained, but hunger had made her bold. She had learned to track rabbit footprints, dig out edible roots, and use her ears to know when a bird had landed nearby. At the stream, she bent down and drank water with her hands. It was cold and tasted of leaves, but it helped. She washed her face and looked at her reflection in the water. I look like a stranger, she said softly. She touched the scar on her arm, the one from the stone they threw at her the day she was banished. Everything hurt, her heart, her body, her memory. But she didn't want to die, she just wanted peace. She followed a narrow trail deeper into the forest. Birds flew past, dry leaves crunched under her feet. Her eyes scanned the ground for movement. After an hour, she spotted a bush rat dart into a hole. She dropped to her knees and started digging quietly, praying it hadn't gone too deep. But the hole was empty. She sat back, wiped her face with her scarf and sighed. Her hunt that morning brought nothing. Still, she picked a handful of sour guavas from a wild tree and a few mushrooms she had come to trust. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the sun climbed higher, she returned to her hut. She placed the food carefully on a small wooden tray beside her mat. She sat under the tree and ate slowly, chewing each bite like it was gold. A lizard ran past. Birds chirped above. The world moved on. It didn't care who she was. Ella looked up at the sky. She didn't know what day it was. She didn't know how long she'd been out here. Maybe months now. Time didn't matter when you were just trying to survive. Sometimes she spoke to her parents, just to feel like someone was listening. "Dad," she whispered, "I miss you. You always said I was strong. But I don't feel strong. I feel tired." Her eyes welled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly. Crying didn't help anymore. She leaned her head against the tree and closed her eyes. She didn't know someone else, far away in the city, was already one step closer to changing everything. She didn't know that fate was already moving, quietly but surely. The city was loud, fast, and full of life. Cars honked. People shouted across the streets. Buildings stood tall like proud kings. In the middle of it all was Daniel Carter, young, rich, and respected. He was only 35, but already one of the biggest names in construction. His company, Carter Build and Company, handled projects all over the country: roads, bridges, estates, even government contracts. But Daniel wasn't like other billionaires. He didn't sit in a tall office every day drinking coffee and giving orders. He liked to be on the move. Every week he visited his construction sites, sometimes 2 or 3 in one day. He didn't care if the sun was hot or the ground was muddy. He liked to see things for himself. That was how he built his empire, from the ground up. Daniel had a routine. Wake up by 5:30 a.m., go for a run, eat a simple breakfast, check his schedule, then hit the road. He was tough, smart, and always alert. But he also had a social life. Women liked him. The media loved him. People called him the Golden Boss. Still, not many knew his heart. Deep down, Daniel was lonely. His parents were both dead. No siblings, no wife. Just a big house, quiet halls, and business partners who smiled when money was involved. But he never complained. He filled his days with work and his nights with short laughter. On this particular day, Daniel had a busy plan. His workers hadn't been paid for 2 weeks. The bank was giving issues with transfers, and many of them didn't have accounts. So Daniel decided to do it the old-fashioned way, withdraw the money himself and pay them in cash. "I'll go to the bank by 10, then head straight to the site," he told his assistant. "Sir, should I arrange security?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "No need. I'll go quietly." He didn't like drama, no police escort, no loud cars. He dressed simple, plain shirt, jeans, face cap. He drove himself in a black SUV. The bank was calm when he entered. He waited, spoke with the manager, signed some forms, and withdrew the cash. Thick bundles, sealed and packed in a small bag. As he stepped outside, he checked his phone for messages. That was when it happened. 2 men in black hoodies walked past him. One dropped a small object near his feet. Before he could look down, there was a flash of smoke. Tears filled his eyes. His throat burned. He staggered backward. Then, hands grabbed him. A sack covered his head. Something sharp pressed against his side. "Don't shout," a voice said. "We'll kill you." They pushed him into a car. It sped off before anyone noticed. It all happened so fast, so smooth, like they had practiced it 100 times. Daniel tried to shout, but a cloth was shoved into his mouth. His heart raced. He could barely breathe. His hands were tied behind his back. They drove for hours, turning, stopping, speeding again, then finally, silence. They pulled him out roughly and dragged him across gravel and dust. He heard the creak of an iron door. Then cement, echoes, an empty place. They sat him down and took off the sack. His eyes adjusted slowly. The building was old, uncompleted. No windows, bare walls. A few broken blocks and wooden planks. In the corner, a mat. One bulb hung from a wire. He was alone with two men. One looked serious. The other was chewing gum and scrolling on his phone. "You'll stay here," the serious one said. "If your people love you, they'll pay." They left and locked the door behind them. Daniel sat there, wrists aching, face covered in sweat. For the first time in years, he was powerless, and the silence that followed was louder than any noise he had ever heard. Ella tied a bundle of dry sticks together and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. The sun was hot. Sweat rolled down her face, but she didn't stop. Her small hut needed repairs. The last rain had nearly pulled the roof off. She moved carefully through the thick bush, gathering palm leaves and more wood. Thorns scratched her ankles, flies buzzed around her ears. But she was used to it. This was her life now. Building, fixing, surviving. Her hands were full, her legs were sore, but what hurt most was the dry feeling in her throat. She was very thirsty. The stream was still far, and she hadn't brought water. She dropped her load under a tree and sat down to rest. She leaned her head against the tree trunk, closed her eyes and whispered, "God, just a little help. Just something to hold on to." When she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone. An old woman stood a few steps away, holding a calabash of water. She was dressed in a faded wrapper, her feet dusty, her face kind. Her eyes were soft and deep, like someone who had seen many years, but still carried peace. Ella's heart jumped. She hadn't seen anyone use that bush path before, not ever. The woman smiled. "Drink," she said, holding out the calabash. Ella stared at her, confused. "How did you get here?" "Don't worry," the woman said gently. "You looked thirsty." Ella slowly took the calabash. The water was cool and sweet, the best she'd tasted in months. She drank in silence, then looked at the woman again. "Thank you," she said. "No one ever comes this way." The woman sat beside her under the tree. Her voice was calm, almost like a song. "You're strong, my child," she said. "Stronger than you know. Ella Fruncio il Segno. Do I know you?" The woman smiled again. "In time you will." For a moment the air felt lighter. The trees swayed softly. The forest was still. The woman continued, "Don't let their words live in your head. You're not cursed. You were never cursed. They were afraid of what they didn't understand." Ella looked down. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Everyone hates me. Even God seems far." "God is closer than you think," the woman said. "He hears even the cries you don't speak." Tears filled Ella's eyes. The woman touched her hand, warm, steady. "Something good is coming. It's already walking toward you." Ella looked at her closely now. There was something about her face, something familiar. Like a memory, a smell, a voice. "I don't understand," Ella whispered. "You will," the woman said. Then she stood up, smiled one last time, and began to walk away. "Wait," Ella called, standing quickly. "Please, don't go yet." But the woman didn't answer. She had vanished. No footprints, no sound, nothing. Just the breeze. Ella stood there frozen. She looked at the empty calabash in her hand, and something deep in her heart stirred. She knew what she had just seen. That was no ordinary woman. That was her mother. And somehow her spirit had come to tell her not to give up. Ella sat back down and held the calabash to her chest, eyes full of tears. Hope. Real hope. For the first time in a long time. Daniel sat against the wall, wrists tied again. The cement floor was rough beneath him. His legs were cramping. The last time he tried to ask for water, one of the men slapped him across the face and told him to shut up. The uncompleted building was quiet now. A single bulb hung from a wire in the corner, flickering from time to time. Flies buzzed around his face. The air smelled like damp wood and sweat. He had no idea where he was, or what they wanted yet. But outside, under the mango tree near the back wall, the two kidnappers were making a call. "It's him," one of them said, pacing. "Daniel Carter, the guy from Carter Build." He held a printed photo from Google, same face, same name. He pointed at the man in the building. "This is our jackpot." "Are you sure?" asked the second man, younger and more nervous. "If we get this wrong—" "I said I'm sure, and Collins just confirmed it." Across the city, inside a quiet office inside the bank, Collins ended the call and leaned back in his chair. Nobody in the room knew what he had done. He looked like a regular bank staff, calm, well-dressed, polite. But inside, his heart was beating fast. He had helped plan it all. Daniel's withdrawal schedule, his plate number, his exit route, even which door he would come out of. All of it came from Collins. He didn't like working with criminals, but life had pushed him hard. Loan sharks were after him. He owed more than 5 times his salary. This job was supposed to be clean, quick and simple. No blood, just a rich man and a quiet deal. He picked up his phone and sent the final message. "Start the call. Ask for $1.5 million. Cash, no police, 5 days max." Then he tucked the phone in his drawer and smiled at a customer waiting nearby. "Next person, please." Back at the hideout, Daniel was brought into the next room. One of the men pushed him into a plastic chair and tied his hands again, this time in front. "You're going to make a call," the man with the scar said. Daniel didn't speak. "You'll tell your people you're alive. Then we'll talk." Daniel's throat was dry. He hesitated. "If you don't cooperate," the man added, "we'll start with your fingers. 1 every day." Daniel sighed slowly. He was trained to be calm, even under pressure. But this wasn't a business deal. This was survival. They gave him a phone. He dialed. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Daniel?" It was his sister, Melissa. Her voice was shaky. "It's me," he said, voice low. "I'm okay, but I need you to listen carefully. I've been taken. Don't do anything foolish. They want to talk to you." The kidnapper grabbed the phone. "We have your brother," he said. "You want him back. $1.5 million. 5 days, all in cash. No police. If we smell uniform, you'll be planning a funeral." He hung up. Daniel lowered his head. $1.5 million. Even he didn't keep that kind of cash lying around. Most of his wealth was in buildings, contracts, investments. Liquid cash, that much in 5 days? Impossible. He looked at the men standing over him. They weren't joking, and he knew. If help didn't come fast, he might not live to see the end of the week. Melissa's hands were shaking. She sat at the edge of her couch, staring at her phone. Her brother's voice kept repeating in her head, "I've been taken. Don't do anything foolish." She had never heard him sound that afraid before. She took a deep breath and called Mike, Daniel's closest friend and business partner. He picked up on the second ring. "Melissa?" "Mike, they took Daniel," she said, her voice cracking. "Kidnappers. They called me. They want money." There was silence on the other end. Then, calmly, Mike replied, "Okay. Don't panic. Where are you now?" "At home." "Did you call the police?" "No. They warned me. If we involve the police, they'll kill him." Mike sighed deeply. "This is serious. They'll want ransom." "How much?" "They said $1.5 million. Mike whistled. "That's a crazy amount, even for him. I don't know what to do." "Let's try to negotiate. Don't tell them we're contacting anyone else. Just stay calm." The next morning, Melissa and Mike spoke to the kidnappers again. Mike did most of the talking. "Listen," he said into the phone, "we don't have that kind of cash right now, but we can get $300,000. That's a lot of money. Let's meet halfway." The man on the other end didn't like that. He laughed coldly. "Do we look like beggars to you?" "No, but we said $1.5 million. But since you think we're playing games, here's our final offer. $1 million. If you don't pay, you'll receive his head in a black bag. You have 4 days left." Then the line went dead. Melissa dropped the phone. Her face turned pale. "They'll kill him, Mike." Mike rubbed his face, thinking fast. If they don't see money coming soon, they'll get impatient. "What now?" "We raise the money. We sell assets. His mansion, cars, anything. But everything is in Daniel's name." Mike nodded. Then we speak to the lawyers. There must be a way. We're out of time. That afternoon, the estate agents were called in. Daniel's mansion, a beautiful 5-bedroom home with marble floors and a rooftop garden, was quietly put up for urgent sale. His luxury car was also listed. Mike reached out to investors, old clients, and anyone who could help. The news wasn't made public yet. Only a few people knew. And behind closed doors, the clock was ticking. In a quiet room, Melissa sat by herself, staring at an old photo, her and Daniel as kids. He was holding her hand, smiling. She wiped her tears. "He saved me so many times," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." She didn't sleep that night. In the kidnap hideout, Daniel was losing strength. They had tied him back to a chair. No food that day, just a few sips of water. His face was dry, his lips cracked. He listened to the men laugh outside the room. They were making phone calls, talking about money, joking about what they'd buy when the deal was done. He closed his eyes and prayed silently. "Someone, please help me." But far from the city, deep in the forest, someone was already closer than he knew. A girl who had nothing. And yet, she might be the only one who could save him. The sun was just rising when Ella left her hut. She had set a trap deep in the forest a few days ago. Just a simple snare made from rope and sticks. If it worked, she might catch a small animal for food. If not, well, she was used to disappointment. She wore her wrapper tightly around her waist and carried her hunting stick in one hand. Her scarf was tied to keep her hair off her face. The bush path was quiet, only the sounds of birds and dry leaves beneath her feet. But today, something told her to take a different path. She paused at the usual turning, looked down the trail, then stepped into a narrow path she hadn't walked before. It was wilder, thicker, harder to move through, but something about it pulled her in. After 30 minutes of walking, she stopped to check her trap. Empty. She sighed, wiped her forehead, and turned to head back, but changed her mind. She followed the new path a little further. That's when she heard voices. She crouched low behind a thick tree. Voices weren't common here. No farmers came this deep, no hunters, no one. She crept closer, careful not to step on dry branches. Then she saw it. An uncompleted building, hidden by trees and tall grass. It had no windows, just blocks and sticks. But someone was using it. She saw 2 men sitting under a shade, laughing. One was sharpening a knife, the other was counting something. Money, papers. Her heart skipped. She crawled closer, moving like a lizard through the leaves. She lay flat behind a pile of broken cement blocks and peeked through a gap. Inside the building, she saw something that froze her completely, a man tied to a chair. His head was low. He looked weak, dirty, and tired. But it was his clothes that caught her attention, not rags like hers. He wore expensive trousers. His watch still glinted, even with dust on it. She had no idea who he was, but one thing was clear. He didn't belong here. She covered her mouth to stop a gasp. Kidnappers, real kidnappers. And they had someone inside. Ella stayed hidden for hours. She didn't move. She barely blinked. She watched everything, how many men came out. When they changed guard, who smoked, who slept. At one point, 2 of them argued over who was supposed to be watching the prisoner. She learned fast. Only one man stayed awake at night, and he liked to sit by the fire and drink from a bottle. As darkness fell, Ella crawled behind a cracked wall on the side of the building. The ground was rough and cold. Dry leaves scratched her arms. Her legs were cramping, but she didn't move. From there, she could see almost everything. 2 men were talking again. One said, "Let's finish this now and go." The other replied, "We wait. They'll pay. He's worth millions." Then they laughed like it was funny. Inside the room, the man groaned softly. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Ella clenched her fists. She didn't know who he was. But this wasn't right. She didn't sleep. She didn't move. She just watched, every blink, every voice, every shadow. And quietly, she started forming a plan. The clock was ticking. In the city, Melissa sat beside Mike, her eyes fixed on the screen, showing her brother's face in her mind. Tied up, helpless. So far, they had raised $450,000 in cash, most of it from Mike, who had called in old favors from friends, past clients, and one generous investor. It wasn't easy, but people trusted Mike. Still, it was less than half of what the kidnappers demanded. "We need to sell the mansion," Melissa said again. "It's our only chance." Mike nodded. "I've reached out to buyers. 2 of them are interested, but none have made a firm offer." "What's the delay?" she asked. "They want inspection. One wants to split payment. Too much back and forth. We don't have time." Melissa sighed, covering her face with both hands. "Daniel's out there, tied up somewhere, and we're wasting time." Mike leaned forward. "We'll keep pushing. But if they call back, we give them what we have. We beg." Far from the city, in the deep bush, Ella crouched behind a broken wall. It was almost midnight. The fire outside was dying. 2 of the men were snoring, their guns lying lazily beside them. The third sat against a tree with a half-empty bottle, nodding off slowly. Daniel was inside, tied, weak, and barely moving. Ella had watched for hours. Now was the time. She pulled the small blade from her waist, old, rusty, but sharp enough. She crawled forward, sticking close to the building's shadow. Her feet were silent on the dry ground. The drunk guard grumbled something and turned his head. She froze, waited. Nothing. She moved again. Inside the room, Daniel's head was hanging low. His skin looked pale. His shirt was soaked with sweat. He didn't even look up when she entered. "Sir," she whispered, "I'm here to help." His head turned slightly. His eyes blinked. For a moment, he looked like he couldn't believe she was real. She dropped to her knees and started cutting the ropes. Her fingers were trembling, but she worked fast. The rope snapped free. Daniel slumped forward. She caught him by the arm. "You need to stand." He nodded weakly. With one arm around her shoulder, they moved toward the door. Then, a noise. One of the men stirred. Ella's heart nearly stopped, but the man only scratched his leg, turned over, and went quiet again. She and Daniel slipped out into the bush. They didn't run. They couldn't. They walked fast and low. Ella led the way, past dry logs, around thorn trees, through hidden paths only she knew. Every sound made her heart jump, but they didn't stop. After nearly an hour, they heard it. A truck. A real one, moving on a bush road used by firewood sellers. Ella ran onto the path and waved. The driver slowed, shocked by the sight of them. "Please," Ella said, "he needs help." One look at Daniel was enough. The driver helped them into the back and turned toward town. By morning, Melissa's phone rang. She answered with a trembling voice. "Hello?" "It's me," Daniel said softly. "Daniel?" Her scream echoed through the house. Mike grabbed the phone. "Where are you? Are you safe?" Daniel nodded slowly, though they couldn't see it. "I'm okay. And I owe my life to someone you've never met." He looked beside him at Ella. She was quiet, watching trees pass by, hands resting in her lap. Daniel smiled faintly. "She saved me." The sun had barely touched the sky when the first kidnapper woke up and stretched his arms. He looked around lazily, then froze. The fire had gone cold. The drunk guard was gone. So was the prisoner. "Daniel!" he shouted. He ran to the room, empty. The chair was there, the cut ropes were there. But Daniel Carter was gone. Chaos broke loose. They shouted, grabbed their guns, and ran into the bush. Search everywhere. They scattered through trees, calling each other's names, yelling threats. But it was too late. Daniel and Ella were long gone. The tracks were confusing. Ella had taken a winding path through the forest, stepping carefully to avoid leaving signs. By the time the kidnappers thought to check the main bush road, Daniel was already on his way to safety. They cursed and blamed each other, but deep down, they knew they had failed. In the city, Melissa stood at the hospital gate with Mike. Daniel had asked them to meet him there quietly. When the car pulled in, Melissa didn't wait. She ran forward and hugged her brother so tightly he winced. "Sorry," she whispered, sobbing. "I thought I lost you." Mike pulled him in next. "You're stronger than you look," he joked, his voice cracking. Then they turned to Ella. She stood a little behind, unsure of what to say or do. Melissa stepped toward her slowly. "You're Ella?" she asked. Ella nodded shyly. Without warning, Melissa pulled her into a warm hug. "Thank you. Thank you for saving my brother." Mike stepped forward, smiling. "You're a hero." Ella Sisson Rageau, no one had ever called her that. That day, she was treated like royalty. Doctors checked her first. She was given clean clothes, a hot meal, and a soft bed in the guest room of Daniel's house. Melissa stayed by her side like a sister. Everyone around the house respected her. No one saw a poor village girl anymore. They saw a woman who risked her life to save a man the world almost lost. 3 days later, Daniel got a call from the police. He put it on speaker while sitting with Ella, Mike, and Melissa. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter. This is Inspector Chaik from the Anti-Kidnap Unit. I just wanted to inform you, we've made arrests." Daniel sat up. "You found them?" "Yes, sir. We tracked their movements and phones. 3 kidnappers have been arrested and are now in custody." There was a short pause, then the officer added, "Also, the man who helped them from the inside, he worked at the bank. He gave them your withdrawal details and movement." Daniel's eyes widened. "A banker?" "Yes, sir. His name is Collins. He confessed. He's facing charges and will appear in court next week." Daniel leaned back slowly, shocked. "Unbelievable." The officer continued, "You're safe now, Mr. Carter, but if anything else comes up, we'll keep you informed." "Thank you, officer." He ended the call. The room was silent for a moment. Then Daniel looked at Ella and smiled. "It's over." The days that followed were quiet. Daniel didn't talk much. He was resting, healing, processing everything. Ella stayed close, not to ask questions, but just to be near. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply showed up, with her calm presence, her steady silence, and her rare but warm smile. It was more comforting than words. A week later, Daniel booked 2 plane tickets and handed her one at breakfast. She looked at him in surprise. "Where are we going?" He smiled gently. "Somewhere peaceful. Just you and me?" The Maldives. Clear skies, blue water that sparkled like glass, white sand underfoot. It was a world Ella had never imagined, even in dreams. She walked quietly beside him along the shoreline, her feet bare, her long scarf blowing in the breeze. Her laughter was soft, like it had forgotten how to come out, but was learning again. They swam, ate together, took long walks under moonlight. No guards, no reporters, no noise. Just peace. And in that peace, something grew between them. Not just closeness, but something deep. Solid. Real. Daniel wasn't the same man from before. He was softer now, more present. And Ella, she had never felt seen like this before. One afternoon they sat side by side on a swing overlooking the sea. Daniel reached for her hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said. Ella no miroa el. She just smiled and squeezed his fingers gently. "You survived," she said. That was enough. Months later, they were together, not just by chance, but by choice. Daniel built a new home, tucked away near the hills, where trees danced in the wind and sunlight poured in through large windows. They lived there, Daniel and Ella, along with their 2 children. A curious, playful boy named Liam, and a gentle, smiling girl named Amira. Ella had gone back to school, something she never thought would happen. Now she held a master's degree in accounting. She ran her own foundation, helping homeless and banished girls. Girls like she once was. People respected her, some called her lucky. But she knew it wasn't luck. It was grace and courage and survival. Some evenings, she and Daniel would sit outside on the porch, watching the stars. They didn't talk much about the kidnapping anymore. They didn't have to. Sometimes Daniel would glance at her and say with quiet conviction, "You saved my life." And every time Ella would look at him and smile. "No, we saved each other." The end.